Hi, you have reached the podcast of Professor Chaim Shor. In this episode, only there's no fear of God in this place. Genesis 20:11.
Only no fear of God in this place. Genesis 20:11. Law and order is cornerstone for a civilized society. Is this enough for the survival of a society characterized by only there is no fear of God in this place? Law may be formed, imposed, and preserved by a brutal dictatorial regime. Human history is awash with such regimes, past and present. But what happens when law and order is maintained by democratically elected representatives, forming government of the people, by the people, for the people? Gettysburg Address, November 19, 1863. Does this guarantee a civilized society where morality laws are not rampantly violated? The Bible painstakingly tells us, in great detail, two stories. They seemingly are unrelated. Yet they are amazingly look-alike. And they share the same conclusion regarding what happens when law and order is preserved, yet there is no fear of God in this place. The first story is that of Abraham and Sarah, moving temporarily to reside in the Philistine city of Gerar. Abraham, fearing for his life because of Sarah's beauty, introduces Sarah as his sister. This triggers the king of Gerar, Abimelech, to take her. Genesis 20:2. God appears to King Abimelech in the dream of the night to tell him that he would die because he took a woman who had a spouse. Then there is a dialogue between God and Abimelech, all within the same dream. The king is repentant and apologetic. Genesis 20:5. In the integrity of my heart and innocence of my hands have I done this. Namely, taking Sarah, Abraham's wife. At the end of the dream, God informs the king that he knows that what Abimelech had done was innocently done. Therefore, by not letting the king touch Sarah, God prevented the king from sinning against him. The king is spared, and he would not die. The next day, King Abimelech meets Abraham, asking him why he had lied about Sarah, saying that she was his sister. In the words of King Abimelech, Genesis 20:9. You have done to me deeds that ought not to be done. In other words, there is law and order in my kingdom, where I am the ruler. Abraham responds, Genesis 20:11, because I said to myself, only, there is no fear of God in this place, and they will slay me for my wife's sake. In other words, I, Abraham, fully understand, King Abimelech, your concept of law and order. You have done to me deeds that ought not to be done. Yet, I, Abraham, was still anxious for my own personal survival. Why? Because only there is no fear of God in this place. In the pursuing chapter 21 of Genesis, the scenario that Abraham was envisioning, crime under the auspices of law and order, comes to full fruition. Genesis 21:25. And Abraham reproached Abimelech for the well of water which Abimelech's servants had plundered from Abraham's servants. Sure enough, King Abimelech, who had prior said to Abraham, in chapter 20, that law and order should be preserved, you have done to me deeds that ought not to be done, this same king now says, in response to Abraham's reproach, Genesis 21:25-26. I know not who has done this thing, neither did you tell me, neither yet heard I of it, but today. This is a faithful reflection of Abimelech's underlying principle. Law and order. Sure, politeness and political correctness should be preserved any time you have done to me deeds that ought not to be done. Yet, crime is acceptable and tolerable, for whatever reason. I know not who has done this thing, neither did you tell me, neither, yet, heard I of it, but today. This principle, dominant in King Abimelech's worldview, is noticed by Abraham. And he succinctly and correctly sums up its root cause, only, there is no fear of God in this place. The second story is that of King David, Bathsheba, and her late husband, Uriah the Hittite. The latter, Uriah, is lawfully dispatched by King David to be killed in combat so that King David could, lawfully, take the pregnant Bathsheba for a wife. Here is the story in brief. King David, walking around on the roof of the king's palace, see Bathsheba, wife of Uriah the Hittite, bathing, naked. He calls for her and lie with her. 2 Samuel 11:1-4. Learning that Bathsheba has become pregnant, King David first attempts, in vain, to convince the recruited soldier Uriah, the husband, to retire to his home so that Uriah sleeps with his wife, Bathsheba. Failing to do so, David ultimately sends Uriah to the battle front, where war is raging between the Israelites and the people of Ammon. 2 Samuel 11:14, 17. David wrote a letter to Joab, saying, "Place Uriah in the front line of the fiercest battle, and withdraw from him so that he might be struck down and die." And some of the people, among David's servants, fell, and Uriah the Hittite also died. Law and order as pronounced by the king, King David, is preserved. And the written command of the king is carried out to the letter. But that was not right in the eyes of God. 2 Samuel 11:27. The thing that David had done was evil in the eyes of Jehovah. Therefore prophet Nathan is dispatched to the king, with a clear message from Jehovah, articulated in a fashion that would not risk the life of the reproaching prophet. First, Nathan is telling the king a story, the story of the poor man's lamb, 2 Samuel 12:1-4. It relates the tale of a poor man who had a single lamb, whom he nourished like his own daughter. Yet, when a rich man had a guest, he was reluctant to take of his own flock to prepare a feast for the rich man's visitor. Instead, the rich man took the poor man's single lamb. King David, upon hearing the story, is raged. And he declares forcefully his verdict, 2 Samuel 12:5. The man that has done this is worthy to die. Prophet Nathan succinctly replies, 2 Samuel 12:7. You are that man. King David repents. And he repents the right way. The king does not say, I have sinned. Instead, King David declares clearly and unambiguously, 2 Samuel 12:13. I have sinned to Jehovah. Absence of fear of God earlier, when King David had sent Uriah to his death, is now replaced by fear of God, once the divine is revealed to King David via his messenger, prophet Nathan. This scene, with King David, is an exact replicate of the two former scenarios, regarding King Abimelech, taking place hundreds of years earlier, according to biblical chronology. Scenario 1. Fear of God in full view. When God is revealed to King Abimelech in the dream of the night, the king repents. Scenario 2. Fear of God vanishes. When God is not revealed and the internal restraint to avoid sin disappears with it, this results in utter absence of repentance on King Abimelech's part. And what remains is only social politeness and political correctness. I know not who has done this thing, neither did you tell me, neither yet heard I of it but today. Contrast these scenarios involving King of Gerar, Abimelech, and King David with how Abraham is displayed throughout Genesis. Righteous Abraham does not need constant divine appearances to respect the moral command of Jehovah and to fear God. Even when divine command contradicts Abraham's own self-preservation, biological self-preservation, and spiritual self-preservation, namely, the belief in the righteousness of God, even then, Abraham pursues the word of Jehovah. And with no hesitation, Abraham intends to fulfill the mission set to him by Jehovah, the sacrifice of his son, Isaac. The mission intended to be a trial of Abraham's faith. As told in detail in Genesis, the trial was, in the last moment, aborted by an angel, a messenger of God. Righteous Abraham fully understands that even when law and order is fully preserved, this is no guarantee that crimes not be committed. With the full authority of humanly created law, or democratically created law in today's terms, the history of humankind is still awash with atrocities, past, present, and probably also future. Why? Because only there is no fear of God in this place.
Thank you for listening. Until the next episode, goodbye.